Welcome to the Shepherd Podcast. I'm your host. I'm Pastor Chris. Thank you for joining me today. The podcast is a way to help you get to know some people at Shepherd of the Hills, at our church, school, and childcare. Lots of great people, and also a way to give you some topics that I feel might be helpful to you. And today's topic has to do with New Year's resolutions. Yes, it's that time of year again. It's the end of one year and the beginning of another. I wonder if you're the type who makes New Year's resolutions. We all want to be goal setters and goal achievers, but it's a lot easier said than done. You may know from personal experience that a lot of times people set New Year's resolutions and then they fail to hit them. Well, we've got someone who can help us with that today, and it's our very own Melody Smith from our staff here at Shepherd of the Hills. And so, Melody, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Pastor Chris. I'm happy to be here to talk about something that is fun for me and exciting, and I enjoy talking about it. So,
now give us a little bit of background on yourself and why this is something that you might be able to help us with.
Sure. Pretty much always I've been kind of a fitness enthusiast. I love health food and exercise, and it's just one of my big time hobbies. Mm-hmm. So a few months ago I decided I wanted to learn more about it to just for my own personal success, but I also really like helping and coaching people. Mm-hmm. I discovered coaching my son in sports, that coaching just comes very natural to me. It's something that I just love to do. Okay. But I wanted to be able to know what I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. So I did some research and found an online certification program. It's something that I just kind of did on the side. I went through NASM. It's the National Academy of Sports Medicine. They certify personal trainers and nutrition coaches and a number of different certifications that you can do online. So I opted to do the nutrition coach course. Mm-hmm. It took me a few months, just studied at night, and I felt like every single chapter throughout that course was so applicable. Mm. It talked about goal setting, how to help your clients set goals, how to help them reach their goals, all the different things that we'll talk about today. Mm-hmm. But it's also applicable for pretty much anything. The concept of behavior change applies to more than just nutrition. It can be anything.
Right.
And so New Year's is a good time to start thinking about that. And so it just seemed timely to talk about it now.
Yeah, good. Well, this is great. It's perfect timing. Time for a reset for a new year. Now, when we talk about New Year's resolutions, I think that a lot of people struggle to keep their resolutions. I remember years ago going to the gym, and it's just a crush of people in January, February. They trickle away, and then by March it's sort of back to status quo, and then you come back, and then the next January is a ton of people. Yep. Are there any statistics on people's success rate in completing their New Year's resolutions?
I found one online.
Okay.
Only about 8% of people actually successfully achieve their New Year's resolution goals.
Wow, that's low.
So on the upside, if you've tried and failed, that's pretty normal. You're with 92% of the population, so Don't beat yourself up about it. Why I think that happens is a number of reasons that we'll talk about. Okay. But it really comes down to behavior change is hard. Okay. It's hard. It's not hard to work out every day if that's what you're used to. Right. It's hard to change your behavior, whatever that is.
You're right. So all of us, we can do something different for a day or two, but we're talking about sustained change, permanent change.
Yeah.
And you'll tell us a little bit about why that works and why it sometimes doesn't. What about New Year's resolution in general? Can you give us, what are some common resolutions that people make?
Sure. So I did look at several different websites to get these, so I kind of formulated a list that were common amongst all of the lists. Mm-hmm. So I picked 8. Number 8 of one of the most common New Year's resolutions that people set is to get organized. Yeah. So that's a good one. Mm-hmm. Number 7 is to travel more. It's a great goal. Okay. Number 6, save money / spend less money. So just being more responsible financially. Yeah. Number 5 is quit smoking. Okay. I'm sure that one's probably bumping its way down the list a little bit. I feel like fewer people smoke in these generations, but people really want to quit. Yeah. So that's in the top 5. Yeah. Number 4 is live life to the fullest. I don't know how you measure that, but There's nothing wrong with wanting to live a fuller life.
What do you think people mean by that?
It has to be something different for everybody.
Okay.
And when we talk about goal setting, we'll go into some more detail about that. But live life to the fullest. At the end of the year, how do you know whether or not you did that?
Do you have like a gauge that measures your fullness of life?
You're feeling really full in November, so that you're on the good track.
Okay.
I think some people, that can mean different things. Spending more time with loved ones, traveling more, maybe on someone's list to live a full life.
Sure.
And then top 3 all have to do with health, I've noticed.
Okay.
Across the board, people want to eat healthier, lose weight, and exercise more. Exercise more was one of the most common by far.
Really?
Yep. People want to get more active.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I can see that.
Yeah. So those are the most common.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, people struggle to hit those goals.
Yes.
What keeps people from living life to the fullest? That's vague, but the ones that are more measurable, what keeps people from exercising more? What keeps them from eating healthier? Why do we start out strong in January and then go back to status quo shortly after?
I think we make a lot of mistakes because we don't know how to change our behavior. There's psychology to it. There's a science behind it.
Okay.
So there's a whole behavior change model that goes in a lot of different, it can pertain to nutrition, it can pertain to just about anything, the behavior change model. I think they use it in like addiction therapy, but it's basically you go through a stage of pre-contemplation where you notice something in your life and think, I don't like this. But you haven't really decided to change it yet.
Okay.
The contemplative stage is something's got to change. I really want to do fill in the blank.
Okay.
Preparation, where you're actually planning and starting to get things together. You go through an action phase, and then maintenance. But then built into that behavior model is relapse. And we think of relapse only with like addiction, somebody relapsed. It's usually when you hear that term.
Right.
But relapse can be just relapse into old habits. You know, I was going to the gym really strong for 7 weeks, and now I haven't been in 2 months. You relapsed into your old behaviors. And it's so common because, I mean, it's built into the model itself because it's so common.
Yeah.
Behavior change is very difficult. So one thing I would say, if you've tried it and you've failed maybe several years in a row, give yourself some grace because guilt, beating yourself up about it, is going to work against you. Guilt is not a part of it.
Yeah.
Put it out of your mind. Give yourself some grace and move on. But having the right tools will help a lot, and I have a few tips for everyone today, so hopefully that will help.
Yeah. Now, before we get to the tips, I'm curious about the relapse. You talked about being built into the model. You gave us some steps beginning with the pre-contemplation. Where does the relapse usually happen? I mean, is there a trigger? You know, do people usually go 7 weeks and then the relapse happens? I mean, what's the study on that, how the relapse fits in?
That's a good question. I don't know that I've read any timeline where relapse happens at a certain number of weeks.
Okay.
In the model, it's after the maintenance stage. So I've gotten to where I've created a new behavior pattern. I'm maintaining it, and then I veer off track, and then I fall back into old ways.
Is there a trigger, you think, that starts the relapse?
Sure. I think there are a lot of barriers for people.
Barriers,
Barriers is the word that they use in the course that I took.
Okay.
So part of what we'll talk about today is identifying your barriers, knowing what your barriers are, and then taking steps to get around those. It's really, really important.
Well, you want to tell us what's the model for success in achieving resolutions? Well,
I have 4 tips that I kind of just pulled from different places, and these to me are my top 4.
Okay.
So the first and foremost is to, dig deep and figure out why you want to change in the first place.
Okay.
You really need to know why you're doing this because it's going to be hard. And if you don't really have a strong idea of the benefit that you're going to get out of it, you're less likely to succeed in that goal. Understanding your why can help you stay motivated. Motivation is not really something to rely on because some days you're motivated and some days you're not.
Oh, yeah.
I always see there's a common thing on social media that's Motivation Monday. And that's great. be motivated on a Monday, but on a Tuesday, you may not be motivated.
Yeah.
So you kind of have to rely on discipline at that point.
Discipline. There's a good word.
Discipline's very different than motivation.
Motivation's more feeling, right? Ebb and flow.
Yep, for sure. And discipline has to kick in when you're not motivated. And sometimes when you're not feeling motivated, going back to that why I started. Maybe it's longevity. Maybe you want to be around longer for your kids or your grandkids, and so you really want to take on a healthier eating habit. Remembering that why when you really don't feel like it can help you stay on track.
You know, it reminds me of our podcast interview with Shirley several weeks back. She talked about discipline financially.
Yep.
And that word discipline just really struck me. And it's interesting the way you're contrasting it with motivation. Motivation and discipline sort of being set against each other.
Yeah.
Motivation sometimes will work in your favor, but sometimes it won't be there.
Yep.
But discipline, if you commit to something, then that's going to be more reliable in the long run.
For sure.
Right.
Yep. And when we were interviewing Shirley, I was behind the camera thinking the same thing. What she was talking about applies to just behavior change. Like I said, it can apply across the board.
Yeah.
So it works really well in financial. If you're trying to get on top of your finances, maybe I'm motivated on a Thursday to stay in and save money, but is it as easy on a Friday when your friends are calling and they're all out at the restaurant and they want you to come join them? That's when your discipline has to kick in.
So you just need to have fewer friends, right? Is that the key?
Get rid of them. They're costing you money. No. You do need some friends that maybe have the same goals as you.
Oh, okay.
Not saying get rid of friends that have different goals,
right?
But you can encourage each other, and your friends can be a huge benefit to you.
Yeah.
And we can talk about that when we get to the part about accountability. Your friends can help you stay motivated. So you have to be able to work around that for sure.
Okay.
But, yeah. Don't rely on motivation. It's deceiving.
But know your motivation. Know your why.
Know it.
Be aware of it.
Know it. Because when you're not feeling that motivation, going back to why I started in the first place can help you push through that. Okay. And I'd add that discipline, you may think of yourself as an undisciplined person. Maybe some people think of themselves as a very disciplined person. I think that can grow just like a muscle. You just have to practice it. You can, if you're not disciplined or you think you're not disciplined, you don't have to be that way forever. That's not how God made you. That's just kind of a habit that you may be in right now. Yeah. But you can work on that. It's just like a muscle. Okay. You get in those moments when you really don't want to do whatever it is to reach your goal. You do it anyway, and you're building up that discipline.
Okay. Doing what you need to do even if you don't want to.
Even if you don't want to.
Okay.
It's a fun podcast so far.
All right. Well, what's next?
All right. Number 2 is really, really important, setting realistic goals. So realistic goals have to be achievable. Yeah. So we talked about before we started filming, setting a goal of waking up at 3:30 a.m. to work out every day. Kind of, know yourself, right? Know if that's a realistic goal for you or not. That's not a realistic goal for me, and I've learned that the hard way through trying to do it, and I realized I just can't do it. So why should I try and force something when I will be much more successful working with what I can do?
So it wasn't the working out every day that was the barrier, it was the getting up at 3:30.
Yes.
So it's like in that there's a piece that does work and then there's a piece that doesn't. Don't throw the whole thing out.
Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
There you go.
Find something that works for you. So it may be hard to work out in the evenings if working out is the goal. Yeah. And for a lot of people it is, because exercise more was a really common one. Yeah. Don't try and do it in the morning if that doesn't work for you. But I know someone here that I've talked to here on staff who that works very well for her, and she's achieved great goals doing that. So for her that's great, but you just kind of have to know yourself and be realistic. Sure. Set yourself up for success. So the goal itself is your starting point. It has to be achievable. The second part of your goal is it has to be measurable. Which is, if we go back to these most common goals, I don't think any of them are measurable. So if I say, well, I want to save more money. Well, that's nice, but that's called a subjective goal. Okay. So it's kind of like, I want to lose weight. I want to live life to the fullest. That was my favorite, most subjective goal ever.
Yeah.
You can't measure that. So how do you know if you're even achieving it or not?
Right.
An objective goal is specific and it can be measured. So I want to travel 4 times this year. I can measure that. I can achieve that. That's a good goal. I want to lose 10 pounds in 90 days. That's specific, and I can reach that goal. I want to save $300 a month for the next 3 months. I can measure that. So the concept isn't wrong, but you just need to rephrase your goal so that you can actually measure it.
Okay.
And so you know if you're on track, if you need to adjust, if you're not on track. And so setting goals that are achievable, that are measurable. And then lastly with the goal setting is it needs to get you to where you want to be. So if I want to live healthier, if that's my goal, well, I just want to improve my health overall, then those specific goals need to get me to that place.
Sure.
So.
That makes sense. That makes perfect sense. You want it to be, you want to set yourself up in such a way that you know what you're trying to accomplish, and then you can design the steps to get there.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm a big believer in taking out as much guesswork as possible.
Okay. Yeah.
And you just make it so much easier on yourself if you do that.
Yeah.
So those are my first 2 tips.
Okay.
Know your why and set good goals.
Well, I think we're well on our way. What's tip number 3?
All right. Tip number 3, we alluded to it earlier, the barriers. So being aware of your barriers. Let's use the example of nutrition, because again, this can apply to anything, but nutrition is more of what I know, what I'm familiar with. If I say, so let's say I set a really good goal. I said, okay, I want to eat vegetables every day. Maybe I'm somebody that I don't eat a lot of vegetables. I want to eat vegetables every day, and I want to decrease my calorie intake. I can tell I'm gaining weight, so I want to decrease my calorie intake by 500 calories a day. Those are good. I can measure that. I can measure how many calories I'm having. Some obstacles for me, if I'm going to do that, is, okay, well, one barrier might be convenience. It's not terribly convenient to cook vegetables and cook a big meal.
Sure.
It's hard when you're working all day, and then you know it well. You get home and you've got the kids' homework and everything else you have to do in a small amount of time. And on top of that, I'm supposed to prepare a healthy meal for myself. It's hard. And it's a lot easier to just pick something up on the way home.
Right.
Another barrier might be I'm just stressed out. Maybe I'm not motivated to do all the cooking or clean up after it. There's just too much on my plate. So that's a barrier to be aware of ahead of time.
Sure.
Other barriers could be social barriers, like we talked about. You want to go out and do other things. And I think in moderation, you can't realistically say, I'm never going to go out again. I'm never going to eat out again. That's not realistic. But you can make good choices, and you can work around that. Let's see, some other goals. So lifestyle, sometimes it costs more, or at least people believe it costs more to eat healthy. I think it all just depends, because eating out costs a lot too.
You're right.
It costs a lot.
It does.
But your grocery bill at least goes up when you start buying certain foods. I think having unsupportive friends and family can be a huge barrier, depending on what your goal is.
Okay.
If I'm somebody who wants to quit smoking, it's really hard, but everyone around me smokes.
Right.
That's a barrier,
Yeah.
and that's a tough one to get around.
Sure.
So you got to be aware of those so that you can have workarounds for them.
Okay, so know those barriers and find a way around them.
Yep. So if I was going to find a way around my schedule, one thing that's helped me, going back to the example of nutrition, I'm not somebody who can eat the same meals 7 days. I've seen people that will meal prep, and that's great, but they'll cook the same thing all week. I also don't like to eat food that's been in the fridge for 3 days. So one thing that's worked for me in the past, I'm not currently doing it, but it has worked for me, is I'll meal prep twice a week.
Okay.
So Sunday, when I have time on my hands in the afternoon, I might make 3 days worth of food, and then a second time during the week, whether it's Wednesday or Thursday, you make a couple days again. So that's working around a busy schedule. So that's one example of how to work around that.
Okay.
So that's it on barriers.
All right. So that's 3. You said you had 4 tips.
The fourth one that I have on here, now that I think, I mean, I could have gone on, but I think that these are really the top ones.
Sure.
Is accountability.
Because
this is hard. I don't know if I've mentioned that. Behavior change is really hard.
Yeah.
And having some form of accountability is going to make a huge difference. Myself personally, I know that I'm very frugal. So if I spend any money on something, whether it's a program that I signed up for online, I know that I paid for it. I'm going to hold myself accountable to that.
Oh, okay.
That works for me.
Okay.
Some people may have an accountability partner.
Sure.
Whether it's in quitting smoking, you probably need that because that's a hard one. That's kind of different because that's more of, I guess, overcoming an addiction to nicotine. That's a totally different thing. So it may not be the best example.
Okay.
But wanting to eat healthier or exercise more, having someone to hold you accountable or something to hold you accountable.
Sure.
A lot of people do hire professionals now. So a professional personal trainer, they're going to call you up. Hey, are you training today? You're on their schedule. And this is somebody who can help hold you accountable for that stuff. But accountability is really, really, really important. And it kind of ties back into the motivation versus discipline. Sometimes you don't have motivation and you also don't have the discipline. If you have the accountability partner or a program, even if it's an app, there's a ton of apps now that you can have. They'll send you a notification. I get a lot of them that I've downloaded before.
Okay.
I may not currently be using them, but even that little notification, hey, you haven't opened your app in 3 days.
Yep.
That's still some form of accountability. So that's another option is an app.
Sure.
One other thing, some people, I think fewer people than most, can be self-accountable. Like I can create a whole calendar and write out exactly what I'm going to spend if I'm, trying to be better with my finances or exactly what I'm going to eat or when I'm going to work out. And if I have my calendar, I will stick to that. I think some people can do that, but you kind of need that calendar holds you accountable. Sure. That's still something that helps you to stay motivated.
So accountability doesn't always have to be another person. It could be an app, it could be a calendar, some sort of system that you put in place to remind you, to reinforce.
Yep.
Okay, so sometimes you just have to get outside the box.
Yeah, for sure. If it is going to be a friend, it should be a good friend because you have to be honest with the friend. It can't be someone that you wouldn't say, hey, get up and do it, someone that's going to hold your feet to the fire.
Yep.
So maybe a longtime friend would be best for that, or just if you have a close friend. And if you have a friend who has the same goal as you or the same New Year's resolution, I say go for it. Team up together, encourage each other, push each other. But I think it will make you that much more successful if you have some form of accountability, for sure.
Okay. All right. So those are your 4 tips.
Those are my 4 tips.
Those are really good.
Thank you. I wrote down a 5th, and then I realized it was the same as number 1, but you can cycle back to it, and it's remember your why.
Okay.
So when you start to veer off, or if you relapse, is the term used in the model. Remember your why and get right back on track. Because the model is a circle.
Okay.
Relapse is part of that circle. Not everybody's going to relapse.
Right.
But if you do, you just get right back on and you keep going. Don't just say, forget it, I failed, I'm done. Understand that that's part of the process sometimes.
Okay.
You get back on it and you keep going.
Okay.
Keep going.
Great. So it doesn't mean that the process is over when you relapse.
Nope.
Like you said, it's built into the model. It's an expectation that we're human, these things happen, just jump back on.
It's a great way to put it. It's an expectation that, we're human.
Yeah.
We are definitely human.
Yeah. I want to ask you just in closing, how does this relate to our faith? Does our faith have anything to say about well, our mission at Shepherd of the Hills, lead people into a life-changing relationship with Jesus. So life change is a part of that. But can you connect this to our faith?
Absolutely. As a Christian, I think that it's really important that we self-reflect, right? That we evaluate ourselves and evaluate our lives. I think that God wants for us to live full and healthy lives. I think that glorifies God. So in that way, I would say self-improvement, wanting to be healthier, wanting to be more active. Some of these on the top list were wanting to spend more time with friends and family. That certainly glorifies God in your life. That's a very high quality thing to do with your time. So in that way, absolutely, your faith can tie in. Another way too is you think about the temptation to not achieve the goal, the temptations that are pulling you away from achieving those goals. That's a good time to stop and pray. If you're a Christian and you have a New Year's resolution, rely on your faith, because that can be another motivator.
Great.
You can stop and just maybe offer this one up to God. If I'll use the example of nutrition. If I was one of the people who I had a specific, I want to lose 10 pounds, it's late in the evening, I'm hungry, whatever it is, and I'm tempted to, eat the rest of the chocolate cake in the fridge. Maybe that's a good time to stop and say, you know what, I'm just going to go read the Bible, I'm just going to go pray, and ask God to help you. Ask God to help guide you through that and help you to reach your goals. Because at the end of it, it's so rewarding.
Yeah.
It's so rewarding to accomplish something that's really hard and you didn't think you could. Maybe you've done it before and you relapsed and you're hesitant to get back on it because you know how hard it is. When you reach it, it's so rewarding.
It is, yeah.
But I would definitely say for Christians who are looking to reach a goal for New Year's, let it be a faith journey. Take God along with you. It's not outside of God. It's not outside of your relationship with God. As Christians, God is in everything that we do. So do it to glorify God for sure.
Very well said. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, this is all very helpful. Thank you so much for presenting this to us today.
Yeah, it was fun. Like I said, it's a topic that I'm passionate about and I enjoy it. So I hope that the viewers or listeners will feel a little bit more empowered and a little bit more equipped to take on a New Year's resolution this year.
Yeah, I was wondering if you might close, just get into the coach role and tell our viewers, what would you say to them as their coach about their New Year's resolution?
I didn't prepare for this. One thing I would say is don't give up on yourself if you've done this in the past. If you have a New Year's resolution, it's very likely that you've had one before. And there's a 92% chance that maybe you've failed before. Don't give up because it's supposed to be hard. That's why people put it off to January 1st. It's hard. But, stick with the tips that I gave you today. There's a ton of material online and a ton of different resources that you can look at and just empower yourself to reach your goals this year. You can do it. The last thing I will say is visualize that ideal version of yourself that you have. Maybe your ideal self is somebody that eats healthy. Maybe your ideal self is somebody that reads their Bible every single night. That version of you can exist, and you can do it. Just set a realistic goal, hold yourself accountable, and stay motivated, stay disciplined.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And thank you so much for being a part of our podcast today. Please continue to follow the Shepherd Podcast as we bring you people from Shepherd of the Hills and themes, topics that we think will be of interest to you. Today was a really great one, and I hope and pray that you will be successful in reaching your goals. Until the next time, God's blessings to you. May He keep you healthy and safe and strong. And the peace of the Lord be with you today and throughout the new year.